Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Sapochnik with the Enchanting Lawyer podcast. Welcome to our show. This is a show where we interview the most inspiring entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals who share their stories and ideas with us to make us a better professionals. And today we have Brian Carter. Brian was on the show before, but today he's back with a new book, a very exciting book, The Cowbell Principle. And Brian is a digital marketer with more than 18 years experience working with companies like NBC, Microsoft, and Dreamline. He's been interviewed numerous times on Bloomberg TV and many other outlets, and he's known as a Facebook and LinkedIn expert. But also his ideas about business and how to become a better entrepreneur are also quite valuable, and he demonstrated with this exciting book, The Cowbell Principle, and I'm very excited to have Brian on the show. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, congratulations on the launch. For our listeners, the book was launched yesterday, November 4th, and Brian is busy working to promote it and share the story with us. So we are very grateful that he agreed to come on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Brian, I gave a little intro about you, but why don't you tell us briefly what is this book about and why did you decide to write it?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've written several other books on a number of topics, mostly social media, right? Yeah. But, there's a lot more to what I do and work. And I also actually co-wrote this with Garrison Wynn, who's another keynote business speaker. And he and I both share this background in comedy. He was a professional comedian, and I still actually have an improv troupe locally in Charleston, where I live, South Carolina. And so, I was doing a speech for Social Media Marketing World 2014. It was, I think, March or May of this year. And one of the things I threw in there was I wanted to talk about how important it is to give people something that they want, that they really want badly. And for whatever reason, I associated that with that More Cowbell sketch. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Just Google More Cowbell. It's on Hulu. And it's a hilarious sketch where Will Ferrell plays this cowbell player in the Blue Oyster Cult band, and there's a producer trying to record "Don't Fear the Reaper," their famous song, and Christopher Walken plays the producer named Bruce Dickinson, and the band just gets annoyed by the cowbell player, but the producer keeps coming out and saying, "No, I want more cowbell. It's great." So it's really ridiculous. But the point is, and he says at one point, I've got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. So and people love this sketch. It's one of the most famous Saturday Night Live sketches ever. And it's kind of a meme of its own. People create T-shirts and all kinds of funny photos about it. You can just Google More Cowbell, and you'll see all that stuff. So I knew this is like, one thing I learned in comedy was if you don't write a joke about something everyone has experienced, they won't laugh because they don't understand. They have no frame of reference. So I was like, okay, I get it. I'm going to tell these people that they need to find their own cowbell, that thing that people have a fever for. Because if you want people to buy from you, you need something like that. And I decided to call that a cowbell. I called it the Cowbell Principle. I delivered that speech at Social Media Marketing World. And I looked at the tweets. People regularly, especially at an event like that, are tweeting about what people say. All the tweets were about the Cowbell Principle. So I was like, okay, maybe we've got something here. When I started writing a book, I wanted to go self-publishing. I did like 3 different books for Pearson and Q, and they were great. But there was a lot of opportunity with Kindle and all that. If you can control your own price, for example, you can do a lot more that they can't do. So I started writing that, and Garrison is kind of my speaking mentor and a friend, and we were talking about it, and we decided to co-write it. And so that's what we did, was we took 10 principles out of this funny sketch, and wrote a chapter on each principle, and that became the book.
And Brian, I was at the audience when you gave that speech, and
oh, right.
I was sitting there, and the whole speech was hilarious and was really smart and funny, and we can have a whole show about the importance of comedy in business and in life, but this particular concept that you took, people kind of resonate because they knew about it. It's a very famous skit, but also the way you applied it to a business was completely I think was a genius. So I'm very excited about this book. And the 10 principles that you mentioned are also quite interesting because they can apply to almost any facet of life. I mean, whether you're doing consulting, whether you're doing marketing, whether you are in the service business. So what I want to do is again, I think the book itself is quite unique, but the concepts behind it are even more. So. And before we dive into the principles, I wanted to tell our listeners that we will have a unique gift for our listeners at the end of the show. So stick with us, and you'll hear about our offer to our listeners this special book. So, why do you think people should care about what people want? Why would we care?
Well, okay, so I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, if you help other people get what they want, you'll get everything you want and need out of life, which is true, because really, and that's really the foundation of capitalism and the golden rule and everything that makes society work is if you want, let's say you want to have a better marriage, you have to care about your spouse's love language, for example. That's a great book that teaches you how to understand what your spouse defines as love, right? Maybe you love to give gifts, but they love to spend quality time. And if you're giving gifts and you're thinking, I'm totally loving her, but she's not getting any time with you, quality time, she's like, I'm not feeling loved. So you have to care about what people want. It's true in relationships. It's true in business. I mean, so many businesses fail because, for many reasons, often it's because they don't have money, but they don't have money because they didn't create anything people want to buy. So, you're out there, like Warren Buffett has said, when he invests in a company, he wants to see that they have a unique, durable, competitive advantage, right? So for some companies, it's as simple as like Walmart can, charge you the least. For Apple, their products are so original, and the experience of their products is so, people love it so much that it's hard to copy it. And if you did copy it, since Apple in a way stands for originality and creativity, the people who like those concepts would not buy a knockoff. So every person and every company needs to understand what the people want, or else they're not going to be able to get what they want, right? You can't get people's money if they aren't willing to pay you for anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it can also save a lot of resources for the service provider. If you know what your customers, what the other side want, you are able to laser focus your service, and of course they'll be happy about it.
And it's really fundamental to if you do digital marketing, starting with like search marketing and search engine optimization back in the first decade of the 21st century, we get all this data about what people want, and we find out, geez, they want this thing 5 times more than that thing. We find out what people are searching for. We've never really known that before. I mean, we'd had to do all these market research things, and we had to guess, and you had to put products out and advertise them before you even knew if people wanted them. So it's so fundamental to what I've done for the last 15 years to go look first and figure out what people want before offering anything. So, a lot of entrepreneurs come out and they're like, this is what people would love, but they don't really know that. They're just guessing, and they don't do any testing, and they put all this money into developing and everything, and then they get it to market. Nobody wants it, and then they hire a marketing person because they think that's going to change. But marketing people can't change people, right? If you don't have something people want, you're in trouble. And the worst marketing projects are where you have to educate the audience, because people don't want to be educated. They don't want to change. They just want what they want.
Right. No, this seems so simple and basic, but so many of us, we don't really want to know or care what people want, and so that's number one. Just try to find out.
It's easy. It's easy to be selfish. It's also easy to think you know your customers better than you do.
Right.
So
how do we find out what people really want? I mean, as opposed to not what you think they want.
Yeah. Well, again, I would go like whenever I do research for anything, I feel like kind of a geek doing it, but I'll go to AdWords keyword tool and type it in, see what phrases people are searching for and find related things that Google knows about that I didn't even know were related. And another thing you can do, we had a few clients, marketing clients, who they're putting out, like, say, an app. One of them was putting out a financial bill paying app. And this is a great example of they had no idea that people didn't really want this until we started trying to market it. The first thing we tried to do was play with what kind of slogans the company should have and how they should present this. And it turned out that nobody really wanted it. So sometimes you think, oh, I want to help this group of people, and you think you know what they need, but they don't want that thing, right? And experts do this a lot too. They're like, I know what those people need to know or need to do, but if it doesn't line up with what they want, or you can't attach it to something they already want, then you're never going to get anywhere. So that's why they say, sell people what they want, give them what they need. So when you deliver, you want to give them what they want and what you know they need to get better. But you have to look first at what they want, because that's what's going to really motivate them. The other thing that motivates them is what they don't want, which is what they're afraid of. So there's another saying that if you want to motivate people to do something new, you should talk about what they're afraid of is going to happen. What's going to happen if they don't take action or buy your thing or whatever? Well, this negative stuff is going to happen. If you're afraid of that, you're more likely to buy.
Right. It kind of gives them the sense of urgency at that point.
Right. Absolutely.
And, I see a lot of people are sending surveys these days. Do you think surveys are good tools to study what people want before you do anything?
I think surveys are okay. I don't think they're ideal. I mean, you never really know until you're actually selling something and people are buying or not buying. You don't really know. It's a lot easier to improve a business that's already selling something than it is to sell something new. But the weakness of surveys is that people think they know what they want and they have an ideal view of themselves of what they would do, but it's not always what they do, right? And so the problem is that people aren't always completely honest with themselves, nor do they always really understand why they do what they do. So, I mean, some people are buying, like, are you going to plan to buy like 200 pounds of cookies this year? No, I'm not. But maybe you actually do end up eating 200 pounds of cookies next year. I have no idea. So you're not going to get that out of a survey.
Yeah, because it's anonymous most of the time and nobody cares. So I just put no everywhere. So it's not the most.
That's true. And the weakness of in-person panels, there are a number of weaknesses of those, but sometimes they're just trying to impress the researcher, which throws off your data.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a good point. So, another thing you mentioned in the book, which I find very interesting, is you talk about opposition. You say that if you haven't made a few enemies, you're probably not that good.
Yeah.
and I want to talk about that because I feel we have a large Facebook page for our law firm, and you have fans coming in, and once in a while you get people to say bad things, especially when they're legal heated issues. And I used to take it personally, but I think now I realize that as you expand your platform, obviously you're going to get haters and people that are not happy with what you say. That's actually a good thing. That means you're growing, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about what's your idea about this?
Well, so yeah, I think that if you stick out in any way, there's a good chance that that people you're gonna have haters, and so there's actually haters are good because like I think Churchill said, oh, you have enemies, good, because you stood up for something in your life, right? Like it's much easier to have no ambition. Well, for some people, it's easier to have no ambition and not stand out from the crowd at all, never have a controversial opinion. But as soon as you really want something, you're going to find critics because, first off, there are people who are going to be critical of anybody that does anything or accomplishes anything because, they're either cynical, resentful, or jealous, right? And that's a problem. There's this old crabs in a bucket thing where, this could be apocryphal, but they say, this is the story of these chefs that have crabs. I have no idea if it's true, but it's a great analogy. So you put these crabs in a bucket, and there are enough of them in there that with those pincers they had, they could climb out. But as soon as one of them gets close to the top, the other one below it's trying to get up by pulling it down, because that crab is something to grab on to pull them up, but they both end up getting pulled down. So, it's tough. We talk about in this book mentors as well. So there are people you want to have in your life who are going to give you criticism, but you can't take criticism from everybody, because you don't necessarily know where they're coming from or if they have your best interests at heart or anything like that. But it's, a lot of people too, and I watch a lot of basketball, and one of the things that happens is, especially like during the playoffs, if any player on the team says something negative about another player on the other team, that could actually motivate the team and that player to play a lot better. Mm-hmm. So some people are really motivated by challenges and by, people telling you what you can and can't do. Like, I have kind of a rebellious streak in me too. If somebody says I can't do something, I'm more likely to do it, So yeah, I think that's part of it. I also think it's tough when you're achieving things and you have ambition. You can look at, like, sometimes I'll look at my bio and I'm like, who is that guy? I mean, I know I've accomplished that stuff, but I don't always feel like that person. And there's an imposter syndrome thing that happens to people where they feel like they don't deserve it. There's also survivor guilt. Why didn't the people I went to high school with achieve some of this stuff? I feel bad. Right. So you have to really be able to know yourself and look yourself in the face and understand why you're doing what you're doing. If you know your why, you're going to do, not only you're going to be motivated, but you're not going to have these doubts. We say somewhere else in the book that if you don't know what your why is, why you're doing what you're doing, then probably your how and your what are wrong. Like, if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you might be doing it the wrong way, or you might be going after the entirely wrong goal.
Right. Well, it's kind of like what Simon Sinek is saying in his why. He when he came out with the why strategy, you have to understand why you do things. Otherwise, there's no point, because we don't know where we're going, right?
Well, that and you need motivation. You need sustained motivation, and if you don't have some kind of mission, eventually you're gonna. I was talking to Garrison about this last night, and there was a particular speaker we were talking about that is fairly popular, but has a really different perspective on things, which is that you need to change who you are to succeed. And our perspective in this book is there's some awesome stuff about you already that you can develop, and maybe you have some weaknesses you should work on too. But what we hate to see is when the speakers that are saying you have to change who you are to get what you want. Well, how do you know what you want is the right thing, right? I mean, because you might end up with a bunch of money or with whatever it is you want to achieve, and then sit there and realize, wow, I have no idea who I am.
Right. No, this is actually a very, very important point, because this is, if you don't have a basic concept of who you are and why you do things, how can you achieve anything?
Right. Yep, you can't, and you won't be able to sustain it if you don't know why you're doing it.
Yeah, this is the point of the show where I think I can move my podcast to the philosophical category as well, in addition to business. Yeah, that's great. I thank you for that, Brian.
It's critical because, this is like why companies pay people to be motivational or teamwork or whatever. If you don't have this stuff in your business and people aren't talking about this stuff, something's going to be missing from your business, right. And you're going to have mediocre employees. Right,
and this is why if you read the latest Forbes magazine where they interviewed Anthony Robbins, I mean, this guy transitioned the past 15 years from some crazy motivational speaker to one of the top consultants for leaders, presidents, company, and the reason is because he brought that missing link where, well, yeah, we know how to do our business, but we're missing the passion and why we're doing it. And I think he was able to fill that gap amazingly.
Right.
So it makes sense. Opposition can be, people from the outside, but also when you come in and people say, well, what's the point? You're not going to be able to finish law school. You're not going to be able to start that business. Don't even bother. That's when you say, you know what? I'm going to do it. And you take that negativity and say, you know what? I'm going to do it 10 times over, and I'm going to prove it to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I don't know if this is another existential thing. I don't personally believe in reincarnation. I believe you've got one shot.
Right.
This is your life. This is not practice. So what do you want out of your life, right? And some people are totally happy to watch 4 hours of TV a day or play Xbox when they could be playing what I'd call the video game of life, right? Where you get actual points, which are dollars or other types of rewards. But that's the question to ask yourself is what do you want out of life? And the people who are not satisfied with that average life are going to do this. And hopefully the stuff in this book will help them do it faster.
And so, this is, I mean, again, the point of opposition is so important because we never think about it in that way. By putting it kind of out there, I'm already thinking in my mind how many things I could have done differently and what I can do more. You talk about testing. You say you never know what's going to click.
Yeah.
and to me, it's something, one of those things where many people are afraid to test. And so why don't you tell us a bit, what do you mean by this testing concept?
Okay, well, I mean, a couple things, and that's actually what Christopher Walken said when he found out that this More Cowbell sketch was one of the most popular Saturday Night Live sketches ever, and he's been on that show a bunch of times. And he said, wow, you never know what's going to click. And that's true, too, for me. Like in marketing, I've done, I don't know, thousands and thousands of tests with ads and other things, emails and all that, and I guess I'm not always surprised by what the results are, but you don't necessarily know what they're going to be. And there was actually a research study done on marketing professionals that showed that they don't actually get better at knowing ahead of time which one's going to work. So if as you become, you develop this experience as a marketer from having seen all these different tests, but what happens is that in each different campaign, things are always different. So you never really know what's going to work and what's not. It's really tough because you want to use intuition, you want to use your experience, and those definitely play a part in it. And creativity plays a part in figuring out, here are some different options we can go after, but you don't know which one's going to work. And this also applies to failure and success. There's Nick Unsworth is an interview in this book where, now he has a really successful consulting practice and coaching people on their lives and their passion, that same kind of stuff. And he had to do like 10 businesses before he found that one. So, that's a pretty extreme example of a guy who's like, I know I want to do something special. I know that what I want to do is out there. I'm going to find it. But he didn't quit, right? And in a way, every one of those things was a test. I mean, my story is similar. Like I became an acupuncturist, and after a couple years of practicing it, and then also at the same time having some monetary success online with SEO and with this website I had created about Chinese medicine, I realized I didn't really enjoy practicing acupuncture. I liked figuring out what would help people feel better, but I didn't actually like the one-on-one all day long type of experience. I'm an introvert. I'd rather be behind the computer or up on stage, and I can do a certain amount of face-to-face and networking and all that stuff, but it's not my strength. I'm not that extroverted salesperson guy that can be with people for 16 hours straight. And you learn that stuff about yourself and about what will work well in the world for you by trying a whole bunch of different things, because you never know what's going to click.
Right. No, that's an excellent example. And I'm thinking to myself, it's a new fact that I learned about you. And I'm thinking, well, would I let this guy stick needles in me? I'm not sure about that, but
well, that's the thing too. Like, I didn't have the personality for it because, like, what people go to acupuncturists, they want there's like a nurse type of personality and a doctor type, right? They're nurturing and the scientist, and I'm much more of a scientist, really, than a nurturer. So put those needles down, Brian. Get away.
Yeah. That's gonna stick with you, Brian, from now on. The needle
stick
boy.
With me, so to speak. Yes,
exactly.
Very good.
Excellent. So that's great. We always keep testing, keep trying. And you mentioned Nick Unsworth. I mean, Nick is a great guy. He's here in San Diego as well.
Yeah.
And he mentioned the story where he was trying different things, and he and you're right now he's definitely riding the ride.
Yeah.
But he kept at it. He kept trying it, and people gained confidence and respect for him. and
Mm-hmm.
he's able to get all these big names around him all the time, and it's just because of his tenacity to continue.
Well, that, and I think the thing about a cowbell, which is probably similar to what he would say about Life on Fire, is that when you find, or maybe that's John Lee Dumas, I'm mixing
Right.
them up. Sorry, they're similar. The once you have that cowbell, which is something you love to do that other people love as well, and when you start getting paid for that, I mean, the first time I experienced that, I really felt like, wow, it's almost like discovering nuclear fission, which is that energy source which continues to produce itself, right?
Right.
And it's not like every day is great. I still do I have failures. I have low moments. I have moments where I have to figure out like what's wrong. Why am I stagnating? But overall, I was never excited enough in my life to do my best and get people great results and have this continuing like feedback loop of positivity, because I wasn't doing the right things for me. I wasn't doing the thing that I was great at that people loved. Like for a while, I wanted to be a rock star, and it turned out people didn't really like my music that much. And I also didn't have the business skills at that point to get a bunch of gigs and go out and do them and all that stuff. But you just have to figure out what is that thing for you that you love to do that people have a fever for, and then figure out how to get paid for it.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah.
And so, after we test and we know what's working, you move on to talk about teamwork. The perfect team is not perfect.
Right.
So what do you mean by that? And let's talk about teamwork.
Yeah, teamwork is a weird thing. It's a chemistry thing, and it's really difficult. You have to have a gift, I think, for not only knowing, like I think Jim Collins would say in Built to Last and Good to Great, how to get who the right people are to get on the bus, who the right people are to be on your team and in your company, and then figuring out where to put them in the right seats and keep them motivated and all that kind of stuff. So management itself is a huge skill that could be somebody's cowbell. But I also, again, back to basketball, I watch, one of the reasons I watch basketball is because there are a lot of reasons, but one is to watch the team. These are 5 guys on the court at any one time, and then 12 to 15 guys plus the coaching staff. And when you look at, occasionally there are flash in the pan teams that will win a championship, but then there are teams with organizations like the San Antonio Spurs, who they just have everything figured out, from humility to like humble leadership by Tim Duncan to all the different types of people that have to be on a team. You've got, for example, most championship teams have a defensive stopper, right? There's always, and so often there's a crazy guy like Dennis Rodman, right, or somebody like that, or like Ron Artest, what's his name, Meta World Peace. So there's a weird mix of people, and they're not necessarily always the people you would have chosen. Like I have my improv group here in Charleston. Some of them are, just weird stand-up comedians, and some of them are people who didn't feel like they fit into the other theater that's here in town, the other improv theater here in town. But I think we were lucky. We found a group of people who had the chemistry. You either have the chemistry or you don't, and you need a great leader. But sometimes you have people who are a little weird or a little crazy. Sometimes things are a little bit messy. But if you have that chemistry, that team is going to produce great things. Right.
And so, any tips about building the perfect team?
That's that really takes like a manager and a leader, for one thing, and you really gotta feel it out. One thing is you gotta know where you're going before they do. That's part of leadership, and what I've found is, because one of my first leadership opportunities, I totally screwed up. I was going to Toastmasters group in La Jolla in San Diego, and this was around like year 2000 or so. And by 2003 or so, it was about time for me to be president of the club. And I was like, cool, okay, I should step up and do this. and I wasn't really ready. I didn't know it. And I didn't have a vision, number one, which immediately I saw on people's faces they were disappointed about, But I couldn't think of one. I just had no idea how to come up with a vision for the group. And I was afraid that any vision I came up with wouldn't be accepted by them. And so I was such a bad president that I actually found a replacement for myself, And then I worked as a department director at an agency, and I think I did a much better job at that as a mentor and a teacher and all that kind of stuff. It's just a weird balance thing. I think everybody's going to have a different style of management because some people are much more analytical. But on that side, you have to watch out. You're never going to be able to analyze everything that's important or measure everything that's important. So you have to be balanced about it. So let's see. Yeah. And so that's the main thing I found is that you really have to have a plan for the team and a goal and a vision and make sure everybody's incentivized and they're getting something out of it.
Right. And you said something very interesting. You said, when you were president of the Toastmasters, you felt that they saw it, that you didn't have a plan. They kind of lost respect. And, leaders that have respect for their team, even if you don't know really what you're doing in a way as far as the leader, some tasks, if they respect you, they'll follow you. And earning the respect is really the key here.
Yeah, and part of that too is that, I know I was a much better leader in the agency world because I understood internet marketing so well and I was so opinionated about it. I knew where we needed to go. And the same thing with kind of leading an improv group, that I would love to just for everybody to lead, but they want a leader and I can do it. And I have very specific opinions about where we should go, and I try to leave room for everybody to have their opinions and do what the group wants. But you really do need somebody who knows enough and is passionate enough about where the team's going to go.
Perfect. And so, another concept you mentioned in the book is this. You say how to make sure your actions create your own happiness.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So number one, fundamentally, if you're doing the wrong things, that goes back to the why and the how and the what, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of things you can do, and there's all kinds of people who are going to give you advice about what to do. Once you've got that why and you figured out a how that works for you that gets you results, then you're going to be able to figure out what that what is, and those actions are the what. I hope that makes sense. But when you love what you're doing, that is one of the number one things. If you find that you think you have you think you know what your cowbell is, but the things you're doing on a daily basis make you depressed, and you have to take antidepressants. Yeah. And a lot of people. I don't want to say some people should take medication. That's it's just organic, but. But if you get low moods, or you find yourself bored or frustrated a lot, then you're probably not doing something right, It's easy to say. I remember earlier in my life hearing people say things like, if you don't really love what you do, you're doing the wrong thing. And, if you have these emotional experiences, but I didn't want to accept that I was not doing the right thing. And I didn't know what the right thing was. So I kind of ignored it. And so that's the main thing. And there's a bunch of questions, and there's an entire chapter in this book about how to discover what your cowbell is. And it unfortunately requires some writing and some introspection. So if you're not overall, for me, that's been so valuable in my life. If you just write, and actually there was a recent study that showed how beneficial this was. If you'll just even write about what's going on in your life for 5 minutes, it will totally change what you're doing. So make sure you figure out what your cowbell is, what your why is, and all that stuff. And then you're more likely to be doing things on a daily basis that make you happy. Right.
And the writing exercise that you mentioned is something that quite a few people are advocating. James Altucher is talking about writing your ideas every day. Just write them down every morning, because the brain is a muscle. And if you don't use it, you're not going to be able to be creative. If you're not going to, maybe out of 100 ideas you wrote, you're going to use 2, and they're going to be they're going to be great, right?
Right.
But if you never write them down, nothing's going to happen. It's going to stay in your head.
That's for sure. I mean, I learned that doing stand up is when you get a joke idea, you got to write it down right now or it's gone. But yeah, there's every chapter has questions at the end for you to do. I know it's easy to read a book like this and not do the work, just because it's easier to just keep reading and stuff. But if you want actual transformation and you want your life to improve, you have to schedule some time to sit down and write. And some of the questions in this book will help you do that in a way that's really productive.
Right. And I'm looking forward to doing it myself, and I really encourage our listeners to try that as well. And then, you being a comedian, I know there's some interesting, funny things here, but I want to know, what is the fine line between being creative and being stupid?
Right. Yeah, I mean, stupid. That's because the opposite of creativity is like the fear of trying anything new, and the fear of being different. And if you're willing to get it to try to combine new things, there's actually this cool concept called bisociation that says that all creativity and comedy comes from combining things that maybe should not be combined. And so there's two types of wisdom. There's like this really conservative wisdom that says, we should do things the way we've always done them, and we know what works and what doesn't. There's the crazy, foolish wisdom, which is, ride the horse backwards, like, a medicine man, or try something different, do something weird. The only thing about creativity is that you often create stupid ideas, but that's kind of like brainstorming, when you sit down to brainstorm a new idea or a new headline or a new product idea or an event, you need to create a certain type of environment for brainstorming where there is no judgment. There are no ideas that are better than others. There's no one that has better ideas than other people do. And once you're in that space where you feel it's okay to say something dumb, then you're able to be creative. Because I think anybody that writes a book will tell you, or writes a blog post will tell you, it's a lot harder to edit while you're writing than it is to just write it and then go back and edit it later. I think Ernest Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober, which, I mean, doesn't, maybe in his case it meant actual drinking, but what it means is kind of like anything goes when you're creating, and you can always come back with, Monday morning sane judgment and figure out which ones to keep.
Right. Now, this is, some of these concepts, we don't really think about them on a daily basis, but if you kind of come down to it and really read it and see what you advocate, it just makes sense, because we never practice it.
Right.
Just like the example, which is one of my favorite here, is and I think it's one of the things that people are always afraid of. How do we gain confidence? And what is the importance of confidence in business and in life, in relationship, right? If you don't have confidence, how can you walk into a networking event and start doing your thing? How can you go on a date and make sure you get a second date?
Right.
How can you go and ask for money when you're trying to raise money for your startup? So I think, and the way you said it is, you said confidence, how to temporarily lower your IQ to improve your success. I really want you to explain that, because this is something that is going to be one of the things that is going to drive this book to be very, very successful.
Oh, thanks. Well, I appreciate that. The idea here is that several things. You can be too smart for your own good, and you can be too much of a scientist to ever achieve anything.
Right.
I mean, one example is when we test Facebook ads, for example, or AdWords ads. Now, a statistics professor would say, well, you probably need to get 100 clicks or maybe you have to get 100 sales before you can say this ad or this keyword is profitable, because we really have to doubt the numbers until we have that much data. Well, in the real world, we can't afford to pay for that much data, right? Yeah. And we can't afford to go out of business. So we end up basing our decisions on less than a statistically significant amount of data. Well, that's crazy. No, that's life. And so that's one way that you have to not be like too smart for your own good to succeed. Another thing is that I haven't seen the research to back this up, but I've heard it said a bunch of times that CEOs' IQs are not usually as high as some of their employees. So, sometimes leadership, when you see too many options, you get paralyzed, right? So some people are real activators. They create action. They lead. They move ahead. They move into and through danger without worrying for 72 hours about all the possibilities. So that's part of it. But the most important part of confidence, I think, to me, and let me say this first, I think confidence is critical. If you don't feel confident about what you're doing, you're not going to do it as well as you could. Right. And like you said, if you're not confident about, let's say you're trying to sell something, are you confident in the company that you're representing? If not, you're going to feel guilty about selling it to some degree, and you won't do as well as you could. If you're selling yourself and you don't believe in yourself, you're going to undermine yourself. So how do you become confident about yourself or your company? It's all the same. You have to know, what does your company do reliably? What is it good at? What does it have a high success rate at? Those are things you can be confident at. And the better you know yourself, the more you know how you're going to respond to situations. Again, back to sports, we have confidence in people like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or whatever, not only because they have confidence in themselves, but because we've seen them perform over and over and over again. And some of that comes from all the practice they've done, right? Like, right. You want to be so good that you do this stuff all the time. That's why I think a cowbell is so important, is because you love doing it so much. You're not doing it just enough to get by for 40 hours a week. You're doing it because you love it, because you get something out of doing it even beyond being paid. And that makes you do it more, which makes you do it better, which makes you have more confidence in it. And then that makes it easier to sell. So everything works better that way.
Right. Again, and that some people should kind of engrave in their mind that confidence is something that you build. You don't just get it in one day, but you definitely want to aspire to get it.
And I don't care if people get it from a dumb superstition. Yes. I don't care if people carry like an amulet around with them, whatever. I think confidence is so important that you have to do it, whatever it takes to get it, because sometimes there are places you're vulnerable where like you're about to succeed or fail, and that success will give you so much more confidence in the future, right? So if you have to pray, whether you believe it or not, if you have to, like I said, carry around some weird African carving, whatever it takes, I think it's important to do it.
I carry garlic, but that's,
There you go.
It helps.
I'm confident that doesn't attract a lot of women to you, but other
it's dry garlic, but.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brian, as we come to the end of our show, give us one or two killer tips on how to discover and develop our cowbell.
Okay. So, number one, think about what you've always loved to do, regardless of whether you can get paid for it. But then ask the people around you, and this is one place where surveying can be really good. If you're willing to ask people, like, what have you seen me do that you love to see me do, or what have I done for you that's really, really helpful, or even what do you think is my biggest talent? Because that'll give you some perspective. If you ask 5 or 10 people that, if you don't know already, it's going to blow you away.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And because I personally am so excited about this book and some of the ideas that you have. We are going to create a giveaway, a free giveaway for the next week of this book, and we'll create a landing page and the show notes. So when you listen to those who listen on iTunes can just go to enchantinglawyer.com and find the episode with Brian and the cowbell, and there's going to be a link there to a landing page where you can put your email address and get a free copy of the book for a limited time. You get all the details there. We just wanted to thank you for listening and give you that option to enjoy that book and learn all the cool principles that Brian has created here with Garrison. And Brian, for people that want to find more information about this book, and I know it's on Amazon. Is there a dedicated website for this?
Yeah, there is the cowbellprinciple.com.
And I'm going to link it as well in the show notes.
Great.
Perfect. Yeah. Very good. So thank you so much, Brian, for coming on the show. Well, again, it's always a pleasure to see what you're doing online and follow you and learn from you.
Yeah.
And our listeners, I thank you for listening to the show every week. Thank you for the emails and the messages we get. I'm really inspired and encourages me to continue doing. And I think this is my cowbell. I found it. So that's great.
Awesome.
That's going to
That's
be my
great.
example. So I'm at jacob@enchantinglawyer.com if you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions. And again, be sure to check that the show notes to get your free copy of that book.